15. And I'd like to thank all the candidates who are here tonight. And I'd like to thank the city for co-hosting this and providing us the auditorium, and the city staff for helping out, especially the cable crew and the city clerk. So we have here tonight, well, Eric.
So my name is Eric Bond. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Takoma Voice, and with me is
Bill Brown, managing editor.
And in case you're new to the city, the Takoma Voice has been the news source for the city since 1987. You can find it online at www.takoma.com, although the W's are probably not necessary anymore. We have many mottos, but our current motto is the last one standing. And we welcome you to election season and to tonight's forum, where we'll have a chance to speak with candidates about their vision for the city of Takoma Park.
Brief announcements. There are other forums tomorrow and next week. There's a Ward 5 and Mayoral Candidate Forum October 22nd, tomorrow 7 o'clock at the Essex House Apartments. These forums are sponsored by the Community Health and Empowerment through Education and Research, otherwise known as CHEER, C-H-E-E-R. And they are working with the Essex House Apartments Tenants Association for that one. And then on October 27th, we have the Ward 6 and Mayoral Candidate Forum at the Takoma Park Recreation Center, 7513 New Hampshire Avenue, co-sponsored by the Hampshire Gardens Citizens Association and CHEER also. Thank you.
Okay. Tonight's forum may not be as entertaining as some of the other recent national forums that we've had, but we don't know yet. We want to go over the format a little bit. In tradition of the Takoma Voice, we like to hear from all of the candidates during an election year, not just those in contested races. So we'll be starting out by speaking with the candidates from uncontested wards running for office. Following that, we'll have a discussion about the ballot question, which will be on the ballot on Election Day. Then we will hear from Ward 1 candidates, and then we'll finish with mayoral candidates. The roundtable discussion, which will begin in a minute, it will take about 20 minutes.
Right. So the theme of this roundtable with our select panel is unification, which is kind of ironic because we're supposed to be unified into one county after, back in 1995, yeah. And but the city seems now increasingly divided on class, income, age, racial, and length of residency lines. How do we go about unifying these groups? What are the principles that unify Takoma Park, or do we only have geography in common? So, gentlemen, unify us.
Do we want to?
Oh, I'm sorry. I beg your pardon. We have here today on this panel, I thought everybody just knows them because I know them so well. From Ward 2, we have Tim Mayle. Raise your hand. From Ward 3, we have candidate Rizzi Qureshi, who's unopposed. From Ward 4, we have Councilmember Terry Siemens. From Ward 5, we have Councilmember Jarrett Smith. And from Ward 6, we have Councilmember Fred Schultz. So, gentlemen, and of course we use this as a springboard into city issues.
I guess I could start. Rizzi Qureshi. I moved here about 2 years ago, and I think what's indicative of this issue is, I'm sorry, sir. What's indicative about this issue is the fact that we have this panel here tonight. I think this is the problem. We shouldn't have unopposed elections. And I think the key is that we need to engage populations within our community, and that's primarily why I decided to run. I had the privilege to serve on the Board of Elections as the Ward 3 representative, and it was an eye-opening experience, one, because you have one of the most progressive election systems in the United States, arguably, with non-citizens, felons, and youth voting, or having the ability to vote. But yet our numbers don't reflect that. If you look around the room here tonight, that doesn't reflect that. And that's what really springboarded me into deciding that I wanted to run. We are a city that, as per the last census, is 49% Latino and African American and 43% white. If you look around the room here tonight, I don't think this room reflects that. I support a number of initiatives to do that. I think sometimes you have to do it the old-fashioned way. You need to go around and knock on doors, and if the people aren't coming to you, you need to go to them. And despite being somebody who's unopposed, which I don't like that status, I've spent several hours knocking on doors, irrespective of that, because I'm not going to take that for granted. And then I also support the efforts of our candidate for Ward 3, our council person for Ward 3, Kate Stewart, Tim Mayle, Fred Schultz, and others who've talked about a traveling city council meeting. Although we love Bill and the guys at Takoma Voice and what they do in this room for us, I think getting out there, having traveling meetings on different days of the week so that other folks in different areas can get involved, I think that's the key. And that's what I think is one way we can make the city more unified.
Thanks. Tim, what are your ideas on unification and potential issues that the city is facing right now?
Yeah, and let me just ask, are you looking for sort of 2 minutes, us all to stay by sort of 2-minute rules? Does that work?
Well, this is supposed to be informal.
Yeah,
And
okay.
so we may interrupt you,
Okay.
just to get just to get other ideas out and let other people talk. We
Great.
let Rizzy go because, he's a new guy.
Perfect. My name is Tim Mayle. I'm the current Ward 2 council member. It's been really a privilege and a joy to serve on city council, and I'm looking forward to doing so again. I prefer the word together rather than the process unification, because to me, unification implies that we have to be the same, we have to think the same, whereas together, to me, represents a journey that we're on together, a place that we live together because we choose to live here together. And I like to think about the ways that we have and we can continue to try to make that togetherness happen better. I'm really interested in our schools, and a lot of people move here because of the high quality of Montgomery County schools. Schools are a county issue, but the city pays for a pays for a part-time lobbyist in Annapolis. We lobby in the county on issues like taxes, but we could do a much better job of trying to support our schools, trying to support school infrastructure. Schools are a place where all of the children, at least, the 20% of our population that's under 18, where they are together, where they learn together, they eat together, they play together, they recreate together, and they come back and they make all of our lives better. I'm also really interested in the future of the city with regard to zoning and master plans. It gets wonky really quickly when you start talking about those issues. Again, it's an issue where the county really holds most of the cards, but we can help influence the content of the plan that's in place that helps guide how much and where affordable housing exists in the city, the kinds of redevelopment that occur on New Hampshire Avenue, the protections that exist for our historic neighborhoods and our residential neighborhoods. And I'll just stop there and say thank you.
Mr. Siemens?
Thank you. First of all, I thank you and the Takoma Voice for putting this forum on, but I really compliment you for the topic for this roundtable discussion. I think it's very important and very needed in this community. As you know, I represent a ward that has many residents who don't come to council meetings and we don't see here tonight for this forum. And I've worked very diligently since 1999 when I got on the council first to try to build understanding in the community about the city government and the power that that individuals have by participating in the government or in the community affairs. I think that I get frustrated when we spend money to survey the community on what the city government does well, but we don't spend money on going out to find out what people really need and where they're, what it is, what kind of assistance that they need, or how the community and the government can better serve them. I think all of us are pretty similar in what our needs and wants are. We want to have a safe home and a safe community to live in. We want our kids to have opportunities. but I think that everyone doesn't come from the same position, and I think the real disconnect that I see is that we don't really understand our neighbors well enough to understand what it is that they need to get to that same position that we're in.
Terry, can I ask you a question? You've been
No.
on the, how many years have you been on the council?
Since 1999. So
And-
I was off for one term when I ran for mayor and lost.
And as you said, your ward is frequently has a low voter turnout, and one of the reasons you got involved was to try to involve your ward more in the city process and so forth. What are some of the successes that you've seen over the years?
Well, I feel good that we now have many Ward 4 members, the residents that are on city committees and participating in that way. We do have increased voter turnout since I first got on, but those kinds of successes seem so little compared to where we need to be. The challenge that I find is that many of the residents in Ward 4 are lower income, and they really don't have the time or energy to put into community work when they have to worry about taking care of their family and their kids, earning enough money to get by. I mean, I have many residents in my ward who are not food secure, and so it's those areas where I think the city can do better in understanding what the problems are and helping residents to overcome those problems.
Great, thanks.
I'd like to ask that same question to Fred and Jarrett, because both of you are also from wards with low voter turnout, and it's heavy on tenants and all that. What, you know why? I mean, is it like Terry says?
Yeah, Ward 6 is incredibly diverse. Not only do we have a lot of, say, immigrants from Latin America and Africa, but we have lots of people from the Asian subcontinent, like India and places like that. And it's very frustrating, and always has been to me, when I knock on doors, which is election time is the one time when I make a point to try to knock on every door in the ward. But what I find is that an amazing amount of people who are clearly new to America, who have no clue as to what's going on. I've talked to several today. They were absolutely startled when I told them that they could vote in a city election. So, we talk about our pride in being a diverse community, but I don't think we really practice it in the sense that some of the ideas that we're hearing here. And it's pretty simple to me. I mean, there's nothing magical about it, is that we have to do a good job. I don't think we're doing much of a job at all of reaching out to these households, literally going to their doors and introducing ourselves, not just at election time, and then not just us council members, but city staff and community leaders, presidents of associations, and explaining to people how things happen in the city, answering their questions. Make them feel welcome in a literal sense of being face-to-face, not by sending emails or handing out flyers, but actually interfacing face-to-face. And I think that's what breaks down resistances and fears and that sort of thing. It's a lot of work, but I don't see any shortcut to it.
Jarrett?
Thank you, Eric and Bill, for putting on the forum. This is a huge problem. Ward 5 is arguably the poorest ward in the city of Takoma Park. Its poverty is on the same level as the eastern parts of Montgomery County. And Bill Turk did a huge story recently about their poverty levels. if the city, what I have seen and experienced, there's just many people in city government that do not have any desire or want to put any resources into reaching out to this so-called diverse community. Takoma Park is majority ethnic. You would think that that would mean that the agenda of the city would be set by wards 4, 5, and 6. That just doesn't happen here. Wards 1, 2, and 3 drive the agenda of our council. And so that means that residents that primarily live in apartment buildings that are of ethnic backgrounds ask me, well, things you guys talk about don't relate to me. I mean, if you look at our agendas, they don't have anything to do with someone that might live in Essex House. I mean, we're not talking about affordable housing. The only reason it came up is because of the issues in New Hampshire Towers. And that was a county issue, but the city had to get involved. But things like childcare, things like homework clubs, things like bringing the tenant associations closer into the city manager's office so that resources can be pushed directly to them, those things aren't on the table. They're not even considered. So we can talk about diversity, but it just means that you have a community where you have a large ethnic group that lives here. But the people that live in the apartment buildings feel completely disconnected to the rest of the city. For example, I created a program called Lunch and Learn. 50–60% of the kids, let me just back up and say, it is a summer program that provides free breakfast and lunch for kids, primarily that live in Takoma Park. 110 kids came out to the program this year. 60 of those kids live in New Hampshire Towers, where my friend Fred Schultz is a council member. I heard more about Taco Bell being a potential development in Ward 6 by rights than I ever heard about a program that is feeding, tutoring, 100% free for the neighbors of the same kids that live in Ward 6. No one ever said anything. And these are the same kids that people complain about that are getting in trouble, that are doing all these bad things in the community. If you just look at the rec department's statistics of their camps, 350 kids went through this past summer in the camps. I have one camp that I started with residents, one resident from Essex House. Last year it was at Washington Adventist University. This past year it was at John Nevins Andrews School in Ward 3. There is just not the desire or interest in this community for things that do not have to do with wards 1, 2, or 3. That's it.
Okay, so what do you guys from wards 1, or from 2 and 3 have to say?
I mean, I'll just jump in and say one of the reasons that it doesn't take 4 council meetings to talk about the Lunch and Learn program is because we agree like that. We agree to support it. We agree to support it the second year. So there are some things that I think don't have a lot of debate because we agree that the right things to do. One of the challenges is figuring out how to pay for new programs, and I think we've done that as well. So for example, the city in this complex pays for subsidized before and after school daycares. That's a new program, maybe 5 years old, 4 years old. That's an enormous benefit for working parents, that they can drop their kids off and either have a very low price daycare before and after school or a free one.
And where are those available? Where are those programs?
The after school and before school programs in this building are part of the rec
here,
programs.
okay, right.
City's rec department budget has doubled in the last 15 years. And a big part of that doubling is about, again, subsidized enrollment in classes and in a whole diversity of programs. So I just don't see a disinterest in issues that matter to populations throughout the city. I mean, the other thing I'd say is that we make a mistake if we think that the city government is the be-all, end-all, beginning and end of this. For most people, regardless of which ward they're in, they don't really care. And although government affects their lives, and county and state and federal government and city government affect their lives, mostly they're just busy. And part of the job of city council is to try to represent people who are busy and for a limited time, try to understand those needs, try to do the door knocking that Fred Schultz referred to go out and get feedback and try to figure out how to deliver programs, services, enhanced services to try to serve all those residents, and then let someone else do the job.
Would you like to respond? I have a question to follow up.
I guess one thing that I sort of have taken on personally, at least as part of my campaign, and then what I'm knocking on doors about is, and I think that this crosses ward lines. Frankly, until I entered this race, the wards didn't mean much to me as a citizen of this city. Because, my corner is Washington, D.C., my backyard's Prince George's County, and I'm going through different wards all the time. And I think that's how a lot of folks do live their lives. But I think one thing that is common between all the wards is engaging our youth. And I think youth exist in all of these wards. They're our present, they're our future. And Jared touched a little bit about this, and the Lunch and Learn program is an excellent program that I watched from the sidelines as a city resident, and something that I think we should continue to promote, and I think it's something that we need to focus on citywide with engaging the youth. I think it cuts directly to public safety issues. I think if you have a bunch of youth in the community who aren't engaged and who have nothing better to do, and I deal with this on a daily basis in my day job, I think that we can find some real common ground, and I don't believe that I would ever be an obstacle to any type of program such as that.
So, I'm curious about your thoughts on the perennial question, which is rent stabilization. Do you think that it is a program that the city should remain committed to? Do you think that it's working? Do you think it's meeting its goals? We have got a couple of questions about rent stabilization.
Eric, can I just follow up with
Sure.
one thing that my colleague said? Greg Clark, the director of the rec department, was before the council, and I asked him about his outreach to some of the similar kids in Lunch and Learn, and he said it has been a problem and they had not been able to crack it. So it's not something that that the city itself has been able to penetrate. They have not been able to get into these communities, period.
Thank you. So would anybody, thank you, and would anybody like to pick up on the topic of rent stabilization?
Well, I'll say that I, strongly support the rent stabilization. I think if you look at where Takoma Park is today and the amount of affordable housing in Montgomery County as a whole, Takoma Park has the majority of the affordable housing because of our rent stabilization program. But whether rent stabilization is the end-all and be-all to affordable housing, I'm not going to say that it should stay exactly the way it is today. Maybe there's some modifications needed to it, but maybe there are alternative approaches. And in fact, the council has, over the past few years, gone more towards Montgomery Housing Partnership's model for affordable housing, and actually released some of the buildings from rent stabilization to move to Montgomery Housing Partnership's affordable housing program. So I think it's something that we can look at changing, but part of what I like about living in Takoma Park, and I think it's true with many of the residents of Takoma Park, is it's a value, a community value
I would like to say that I'm a huge supporter of affordable housing. Takoma Park is the premier provider of affordable housing in this region. And that even includes the District of Columbia. I mean, they're getting rid of so many affordable housing units that it'll blow your mind. Their homeless population in the district is so large that they cannot buy their way out of it. So what does that mean for us? Takoma Park's program could use some changes. It currently is what I would call a paper program. We just shuffle paper around, right? We give people rents that are controlled by the government. We say how much that rent can be increased. But the problem is that we do not provide any money into the program. So if a boiler goes out or there is a leaky roof, the landlord has to figure out how to replace that or make that repair. All landlords do not have access to capital. It's just the way it is. I mean, just recently, Montgomery Housing Partnership came before the council asking for us to give them what is called a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes, right? That was just a symbolic gesture on our behalf. But if you look at the amount of money that they need to buy and stabilize a number of buildings, these are garden-style apartments, it's millions and millions of dollars. Why? Because the systems in those apartments have never been replaced. That's not unique to this set of properties. It goes on throughout the city.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I need to interrupt because we're 2 minutes over time.
Okay.
But I think we got the idea.
All
All right. And I'm sorry we have to move on to our next segment. But thank you very much for participating. All right. Thank you. So now we have the ballot question. Here we got some controversy.
I got my notes.
Just go back to your seat is fine. And we're going to do just a little bit of shuffling of personnel. And this ballot question was placed on the ballot a few weeks ago, and it has to do with moving the voting day and year for Takoma Park. So it would coincide with state, national elections. You would go in and vote on the same day as all those. And it's provisional. It's an advisory question. They're asking people if they would be in favor of it if a certain number of conditions could be met. And those conditions have to do with whether we'd keep our unique voting system here in Takoma Park, where 16, 17-year-olds can vote, felons can vote, non-citizens can vote, and we also use instant runoff voting and maybe a couple of other details. It's provisional. So I'm just going to turn it over to Tim Mayle. Councilmember Mayle is the author of the ballot question. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. And so we're just going to have a for and against session with Councilmember Mayle and Councilmember Fred Schultz.
And just to remind us of time limits.
Yes, and we need to
I'm
remind
used to having the
ourselves.
mayor constantly tell me exactly how long I have.
I'm
so-
sorry. We'll try to step in. We're going to give you 5 minutes each, or less if you don't want it.
Perfect. I don't want to take credit for this because everything you do on council takes residents and takes 4 voting members at least to pass it. So it's an effort that takes the part of the community. Instead of talking, the first thing I'd like to do, I know you'll all be here for a long time tonight because there'll be lots of questions. Can I ask the people in the first 4 rows in the middle section to stand up? So just you guys and Rizzy. So if you all stand up, let's say you represent all the registered voters in Takoma Park. Could I have the 2 of you on the end there sit down? That's the turnout in the last presidential election that we had. About 80%, 78% of people in Takoma Park turned out. Now, could I have everybody but the woman in the front row sit down? That's the turnout in our last city election. That's exactly what happened. Residents that, you can sit down now. You can sit down now. Residents throughout the city turned out, 80% of residents turned out to vote for president. Elections for governors are similarly high. But when it comes to a city election that's all by itself in an odd year, we have incredibly, incredibly low turnout. It's not because people are bad or lazy, it's because they're busy. And if we change the timing of elections, it's one of the simplest things we can do. It makes everyone's lives easier. It will increase turnout. The questions that are, the clauses that are part of that ballot referendum question about how do we maintain voting for 16 and 17-year-olds, people with felony convictions who are on parole, non-citizens, those are important questions that we have to figure out the details of how we can do both. But I'm absolutely certain that we can both synchronize our elections with the other elections that you all vote in, and also make sure we can continue to get those people to vote. This is not a new idea. California on the left and Kansas on the right are increasingly requiring all cities to move their elections. Data from California, hundreds of municipalities, show that this is the single biggest thing you can do to affect turnout in municipal elections, and it is the single biggest factor affecting African American turnout and affecting the electoral chances of Latino candidates for office. So it is not just about the numbers of people, it is not just about the ease of voting, it is also about the type of people that vote and the question of unification and diversity in terms of the electorate that chooses a council. This is not an issue that's foreign to Maryland. Ocean City moved its elections to sync up with state and federal elections. They do 2 elections on the same day. You go, you vote for the state and federal, in the state and federal races, county races, and then you get in a line in another room in the convention center in Ocean City, and you vote for city council. The year after they made that change, they had the doubling of election turnout. So this is just a very simple change, a very straightforward change. We're all used to voting. It's not going to change the act of voting. The state law in Maryland requires the state to put municipal elections on the ballot if a municipality asks. So we don't face a difficult path in terms of doing that if we want to do that. So this referendum question is about you all getting to make a recommendation to the council, to the next council, and then the council being able to spend the time to try to make sure to get the details right to figure out if we can sync up our elections in 2018. Thank you.
Wow, 4 minutes. Well done.
Thank you to the volunteers who stood up.
Yeah. Okay, so we will now hear from Councilmember Fred Schultz, who will present.
Does Councilmember Mail yield his minute?
I do.
Because
this messes up our schedule.
as Mayor Bruce Williams is always telling me, I take too long to say anything. And he's right.
Okay, starting the 5 minutes now.
Okay. I think there's an immense irony here that just really amazes me about what is being proposed on this ballot question. Yes, we have non-citizen voting, allegedly. We have 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds being able to vote. Instant runoff voting, which is unique. We have paper ballots, which is this year, which is unique for many municipalities. We have, as we know, we've heard felons on parole and probation who are now eligible to vote. But all of this require, we also have our own unique hours for when the polls are going to be open. If you combine all this voting on election day, it's going to either have to be 2 places where you will come to the community center to vote, and then you will go to your precinct elsewhere in the city to vote. Now, everybody I've talked to says nobody's going to do that. I mean, you really have to want to vote in order to go to 2 different places with busy schedules. So let's assume it's going to be, the vote will be dispersed at all the various 5, I think, different, maybe 6 precincts in the city. I'm not exactly sure of that. We're going to have our starting hours, voting hours, conform to those that are set by the state or the county, whoever sets those. And it also, of course, requires everybody who's going to be voting to be separately registered. Now, I'm not saying that none of these things can be accommodated. I'm just saying that our voting is unique. We have spent years developing our voting system here so that it is unique and it's precedent-setting in the United States. So when I hear Councilmember Mail talk about hundreds of municipalities in California and other places in the United States, I don't know that any of those places have all of the specialness that our voting system has. And so it saddens me to think that after all these years of trying to put something as special as our voting system together, that it would just get lost in all the brouhaha that goes on with governor races, county executive races, state house elections, and judges and all this other stuff. The importance of balloting in the city is going to get buried in all the literature and nonsense that we have to put up with for weeks and months on end. Now, it'll also require not only the setting closing times, will require more election judges. It'll require the transfer of paper ballots from the precincts to a central location, which is an uncomfortable prospect. The state will probably force us to shape our early voting schedule to that of the other, to the state elections, rather than being able to do it at the times that the city of Takoma Park wants to do it. Today, voters come together at the community center. Everybody in the city that votes comes there, and it becomes an occasion. This will be lost because all the voting will be dispersed. So will all the candidates be dispersed, except for the mayor's race, and Lord knows how the candidates for mayor are ever going to figure that one out. I think of our friend Gladys Harvey, who every year makes bean soup to nourish the candidates who've been standing outside for about 12 hours and everybody else that wants to join and help themselves. I think, as former Mayor Kathy Porter said to us Monday night, people do not vote in Takoma Park because they believe their votes do not matter. And so how is it going to matter? Well, it's going to matter if these contests are contested. People aren't going to, doesn't matter when you know that if I don't vote, I already know that Fred Schultz is going to win anyway, so why should I bother to vote?
10 seconds.
And there are solutions, other things that we can do, which I'll talk about in my rebuttal.
All right, thank you. Yay. Yay. Okay, so give each of you a 1-minute rebuttal, and starting with Councilmember Mail.
Great. I agree with Councilmember Schultz that it's a really special thing to stand in line on Election Day with folks focused on the city. I think that's a special thing, and I like that. But the problem is, although we've designed a really special system that's unique to Takoma Park, the act of voting is rare. And this idea of syncing up elections is not a novel concept. It's been tried again and again and again all across the country. And it works. It creates a phenomenal increase in turnout, doubling. On average, it doubles turnout. I'm talking about thousands of people showing up to vote. I am completely confident that we can find a way to let 16 and 17-year-olds and people on parole and non-citizens continue to vote. The very simplest thing is that every precinct to simply have a separate line with a ballot box, paper ballot box. It goes right along with that state, federal, county system. And as Ocean City showed, people go and use that second line. That's the simplest way. But again, we could also, through the process that the city would follow up on after the referendum, if you choose to support it, the city can figure out the best system forward to do this. So I hope it's something that you all will support and encourage your neighbors to support on Election Day.
Okay. And Councilmember Schwartz.
Schultz. Schwartz, whatever.
Starting.
There are better solutions. One, let's move the election day to Sunday. Doesn't have to be on Tuesday. Whoever decided voting should be on a Tuesday, does anybody know? Oh, okay, farmers. Let's make it a festive occasion with food and music And how about a raffle? If you vote, you get a raffle ticket, okay? So you've got more reason to come out and actually do something. Let's make an honest effort to tell non-citizens they can vote. We don't make any effort at all, except we go about bragging about it all over the United States. The same with 16 and 17-year-olds. There's been no effort whatsoever to inform youngsters in the schools or anywhere else. And yet we're so proud of the fact that we've got this. That's the reason I voted against it in the first place, because I knew it was window dressing. Let's figure out finally a way to get contested races. And I can tell you how to do that, but my time just ran out.
Yeah. All right. I have a follow-up question. So say it creates problems and it changes things. Isn't it worthwhile to make changes to get a big increase in voters? So, Fred.
If you want to get a lot of people to vote, you don't have to do anything. Just give everybody a $20 bill when they come in. Pay them to vote. I mean, if the goal is to get a lot of people to vote, that's one way of doing it. Well, there's lots of different ways to do it. But the point is that we want people to have meaningful votes. I mean, you know, if I got everybody in my ward to vote for me, what does that prove? That means they're voting for me because they don't have anybody else to vote for. That's not an election. If that's Uzbekistan or one of these other places in former Soviet Union where it's against the law to vote for an opponent. So I don't think we're accomplishing by running up numbers. I think we need to figure out, make it so that it matters to people to vote. And we're not talking about that by changing the election year from an odd number to an even number.
Okay, Councilmember Mayo, if I can.
Sure.
So this measure is provisional on whether the state and county can accommodate our unique voting systems. Why didn't we find out first whether we can do it instead of having this on the ballot now?
Well, I mean, all ballot questions in the city of Takoma Park are provisional. There's only advisory referendums under city charter. We can do this. So I mean, I personally checked with the State Board of Education and found out about the law that our state senator, Jamie Raskin, helped support and get passed in 2014 that requires the state to accommodate a municipal ballot if the city chooses to do that. So we can do this. The question is exactly how we do that, and it seemed the wrong way to go about it to figure out exactly how, whether through a separate ballot, whether through joining the state ballot, you know, paper ballots. There's all these sort of technical issues. It seemed a mistake to spend time on those hypotheticals until we got a sense from voters of whether they wanted to have a simpler process to show up on one day and vote. And if they do want to do that, then we can figure out those technical issues.
Okay. With 6 seconds to spare. All right, I think we can, oh, I'm sorry, do you have a?
I have a question, and maybe each of you could take 30 seconds on it, if you want to split it. Because I think there are two sides to the question. Councilmember Schultz, you talked about members of residents in your ward who are not citizens and may not be aware of the fact that they can vote in the city. I'm wondering from each of you, you know, since that may be, you know, some considerable amount of the low voter turnout, you know, can be attributed to people not being aware that they can vote. How will changing the election day, you know, will that help in that regard, or will it perhaps even confuse people more? So, for example, if I show up to vote for the city of Takoma Park, but I can't vote for the governor, that sort of thing. So, if each of you could, you know, really quickly kind of address that particular segment of the population and how to reach them.
I think by having it on a separate time is that it's easier to get people to understand that when you vote this time in 2015, these are the rules. This is where you register, this is how you register, this is where you vote, etc. When you put the whole thing together, then you have, I think, the risk for an awful lot of confusion, because you have different registration lists and different places possibly to vote. I don't know if that'll be the case or not, and that sort of thing.
Great, thanks.
A guess and a number. My guess is that there must be 1,000 residents in Takoma Park who are non-citizens. The city clerk, the city clerk tells me that about 25 non-citizens vote in our elections every year, city elections. And so I go out and I knock on doors of non-citizens and I try to explain the process, and I meet non-citizens who are among those 25 who vote. And I'm sure we can find a way to make sure that they can still vote, whether it's through a write-in or a mail-in, which we do already, or through voting with a separate ballot box that day, that they can keep voting, and that potentially we can increase the number of that, increase the percent of non-citizens who are voting.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much.
Wait a minute. Aren't we going to have an applause meter so we know who won? I'm just kidding.
All right, we are moving on to, it becomes increasingly more exciting as we move along. I'm sure you can all feel the electricity in the air. We are now going to Ward 1.
Like what?
Ward 1 got a surplus of candidates. They've got 3. Everybody else got none. They got the juju this year.
Everybody else got one.
Huh? Everyone else got 1, yeah. Everyone's got 1. But these guys have 1 and +2.
So where's Victor here?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I think that's what he said.
Oh, wait.
Oh, okay.
No, it's for Bill.
We supposed,
You'll need that.
We're rolling the dice to see who wins.
Right. So we have 3 newcomers to the council. We have Mr. Peter Kovar. Raise your hand or something, yes. We have Victor Taroni. And we have Elizabeth Wallace, all from Ward 1. And we're going to choose the order at random. Would you each pick up your die? And give it a roll and tell us what you got.
3?
3?
I got a 7. No, 3.
2 3s? Oh, you guys are going to have to roll again. Wait, who got the 7? You got the 7?
No, I got a 3.
You got a 3. You got a 3. Okay. What'd you get?
I don't gamble. No, it's a 2.
It's a 2.
Okay. So we
Okay,
roll
you guys
again.
rolling in.
3. Another 3.
Whoa.
Bill, I told you not to bring the loaded
I'm
dice.
sorry. all
Arm
right.
wrestle.
All right.
We both rolled a 6.
You're kidding.
No.
I think we should just keep going and see if this keeps on.
My money's on.
Take your bet.
Okay, now I got a
All right.
6.
Okay, all right, great. Okay,
So-
Mr. Taroni will go first. We will have introductory statements from each candidate for 3 minutes. And just let me know when you're ready.
Okay.
You're ready. Okay, starting now.
Okay, so I'd like to kind of continue on with the discussion about voting, because I think it also has to do with what was discussed in the earlier part of this session on bringing people in the city together. One of the reasons people don't vote is because they don't feel engaged with the city. So we need to adopt, and the council and mayor need to lead a communications strategy. And there should be outreach. I realize it's not easy, but we need to really tackle this and make this a priority. Second reason people don't vote is because there are not contested elections, or not contested enough. And for that, one thing I've suggested is increasing the compensation of council members and mayors so that some people can actually, feel they could afford to serve, and that the service by the council is recognized. A third reason that people don't vote is the ease of voting. And on that one, I think that we should think about things like online voting or voting by mail. In other words, cutting edge. Online voting, my understanding is experts say we're not ready for. Voting by mail, we are. Oregon does it. I believe Washington does. So we should be leveraging Takoma Park's influence, seriously instituting voting by mail so that we can actually encourage other jurisdictions to follow suit. Importantly, if we just merge our elections, we lose some important information. If we succeed in engaging citizens, giving them a reason to vote, and making it easier for them to vote, and we then see the city turnout increasing, we know we've met those important goals. If we don't see the turnout increasing, it's a performance criterion. So that's why I think that actually voting by mail and this merging idea are
40
pretty
seconds.
much mutually exclusive avenues. I think that we should pursue first voting by mail. It's the more progressive, the more ambitious agenda. So that's the way I would handle that, that question, and I hope people will think about it, and the council will continue with keeping an open mind on it regardless of what the actual result is on this advisory question. But I would hope that people think about it, and you can also see on my website, I have it all spelled out in detail.
Okay, thank you. And you can find a link to his website on the Takoma Voice election guide. So now we go with Mr. Kovar, starting now.
Thank you, and thanks to the Takoma Voice for sponsoring this. My name is Peter Kovar. I've lived in Takoma Park since 1992 with my family. My wife and son are up front there, Paula and Paul. My kids, both of my kids went through all the local public schools and graduated from Blair and got through college. And I myself spent 30-plus years working for the federal government. I worked on Capitol Hill for a long time. I was the chief of staff for U.S. Congressman Barney Frank from Massachusetts. And then I had 4+ years at HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, where I had a political position under the Obama administration. And throughout all my 23 years here in Takoma Park, I've been involved in a lot of local activities. And what I've seen, and I think what everybody in this room has seen, is that we really live in a unique place which has this incredible sense of community. We have neighbors looking out for neighbors. We have people involved in all kinds of civic and other kinds of projects, and we've heard about a lot of them tonight. Some of the ones I've been involved in over the years, I was on the, appointed by the then council, actually, to the Citizens Advisory Panel on Public Safety, and also one of the earlier city manager selection committees. And I'm currently on the board of the Takoma Foundation, and also helped establish, and I'm also on the board of the Village of Takoma Park, which is the new group that's been set up to help seniors age in the committee, in the community. And I'm also a leader in the effort to right-size the proposed development at the Takoma Park metro station. You've probably seen our red and white signs around town. And I think that project is sort of symptomatic of a big challenge that we're facing here. You know, it's great to have a few more choices in restaurants. That improves the quality of life. But we don't want development to destroy the things that I think everybody here loves about Takoma Park. And right now we have, around our borders and within our borders, lots of development projects. And I think the task is to really monitor those going forward to ensure that we don't lose the things that make the city great. And I would include in that specifically, and this relates to some of the earlier conversations tonight, that we've got to keep the city affordable for renters, for new families that want to move in. Now,
40 seconds.
I'm sorry?
40 seconds.
Some of the other things I'm interested in include more focused community policing, really getting resolved the tax duplication issue with Montgomery County, continuing our efforts on sustainability. I'd like to set, say, a 10-year target for having the municipal government be carbon neutral, and inclusiveness for the entire city. So I do support the referendum to move the elections. I support more outreach to youth, translation for the immigrant communities that may not understand everything that's happening here, and very strong rent control. So I think government's a force for good, and I'd like to be able to do that on the city council. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Okay, and last but not least, we have Ms. Wallace, starting now. I'll give you a 40-second warning, starting now.
Hi, I'd just like to introduce myself to you. I started a company at the age of 22, and I sold it 29 years later. Good time, good price. It went through several business cycles. The first Gulf War and 9/11 hit us hard. You learn to cut back, and if necessary, give CPR. My kids grew up in the office. I missed their soccer games, but I know how to make tough calls to survive. And what I love about owning a business is the behind the scenes. What makes it sick and what makes it tick. And that's what I love about the city council. In everyone's story, somebody leaves town or comes to town, and things get stirred up either way. But I like to tell you mine. When I moved to Holly Avenue, I fell in love with the dogwood in my front yard. And I thought, wow, if this dies, I'm going to have to move. It died. The permit is posted on the tree. But as I walk door to door in the last couple of weeks in Ward 1, I feel I've arrived anew in this town. You open your doors, you invite me in, you refresh my perspective. Thank you. My flyer shows examples of my ideas. You can call me, email me, text me, ask me questions after this, but it's the overview I'd like to talk about now. If you look at Ward 1 as an island, one can see, like climate change, the sea level rising. North Tacoma concerned with the rise of Montgomery College, Old Town parking and noise, Hodges Heights, dangerous intersections, Eastern Avenue, rise of supersize, property taxes, and of course, crime. When will the waters recede? Well, nobody up here is named Moses. Let's step back. Look at the cycles. Since 1950, the population of Takoma Park has increased by only 30%. The rest of the U.S. has doubled. When I was a toddler in Langley, the ground was bare dirt. Bathrooms were segregated, and now there are small businesses owned by people who came in from around the world. Now that's progress. Change can be good. We choose every day to live next door to one of the most important, educated, and expensive cities in the world. And the tides will keep rising. New ones like climate change. Real threats are those that scare us so much that we're like deer in the headlights. Why not walk toward them? Greet them. Hi, Montgomery College. You educate our children. Thank you. I can afford the tuition. Maybe they can buy a home. Maybe they can get a great job. Let's talk about your master plan.
40 seconds.
Hey, Old Town. Hey, Republic. Thanks for not being a drive-through. Hey, fear of losing my home. I'm talking with neighbors about sustainable rent controls, sustainable incomes, and job training. Takoma, a resident said to me this week, Takoma is a city in a forest with some stately oak. While we tend to plant smaller trees to replace what we lose, we should plant more oak. Today, I looked out a different window in my house. There was a red oak tree. I bring to you a diversity of experience. I see you, I hear you. I got a lot to learn from you. I'm an acorn when it comes to serving you, but remember, inside every acorn, there's an oak. You're all oaks, and I invite you, Takoma Park, to stand tall together.
Thank you. All right, well, we will have follow-up statements, responses, 2 minutes each, starting again with Mr. Tironi, starting now. I'll give you a 30-second and warning.
Yeah. Okay.
Go.
Thanks. Yeah. So I guess I would just go back to the first discussion about reaching out to people, the non-citizens who weren't even aware that they could vote in the city or probably had no idea what city government was doing for them. And somebody was saying that 25 non-citizens were voting and kind of saying, well, we can just accommodate those 25 people and let them vote. That doesn't, increasing participation seemed to be sort of an afterthought. I would go a little bit differently and really make it a goal to have people be connected to the city and feel that they're engaged with the city, low-income, non-residents, or busy people of any income and citizenship or whatever. This is not going to be easy, and this has to do, I think, with it runs through city government, that the problem of people basically not being aware of what city government is doing. It's a very difficult problem to solve,
30
and
seconds.
I don't claim to have any answer to it. But I would just go back to the idea that we actually do have a metric for this, and the metric is the voter turnout for elections that are solely for the city. What we're saying is the turnout is low and we don't like that. That's actually a good thing in the sense that it's good that we have that metric. We need to keep the metric, we need to increase turnout based on that metric, based on including people in the city.
Thank you. Mr. Kovar.
Yeah, as part of my campaign, I've been going door to door, as I think a lot of the candidates are, and some have mentioned within this ward. And just for whatever I feel like saying, I started that before I knew if I would have any other opponents. I'm glad I have a couple of opponents because it's a democratic system, and at least we have one contested race here. I've been to about 2/3 of the homes in Ward 1, and what I've found, yeah, it's a nice way to introduce myself, but the interesting part is when the people there tell me what they're thinking about. And I think people are pretty well informed, actually, about what's happening here. The one thing they sometimes tend not to realize is that there's this election coming up. And I think people would be delighted to vote, but it would just be something we could do to make it easier if we combined it with the others. So based on my door knocking, and I'm planning, if I haven't been to your street yet, I'm planning to finish that before the election, all 100% of it. So I think that's shown to me that there's a good knowledge of what's going on the part of people in the city. I think the other thing that we have to try to do, though, is this: the days of Takoma Park being able to be this little enclave that didn't really have to pay too much attention to what's going on right around it. Maybe we look internationally in the past, but we haven't looked right around us as much. I think those days are over. We have to really engage heavily in a focused way with the District of Columbia, with Montgomery County, with the state, and with Prince George's County also when you're talking about the Crossroads area, with all the development that's happening, and our interaction with these other jurisdictions is vital. And if we don't do that, I think we're going to find decisions are made for us by what's happening outside of us. And my work on the Hill and at HUD involved understanding how different levels of government work together, and I look forward to being able to do that on the council. Thanks.
Thank you. And now Ms. Wallace.
Thank you. Well, regarding the voting, I'm not for changing the date. I am for keeping it the same day. I think it is special, and I think it really is about involving more people. I think that we don't, as a city government or a city council, nor as the city government, are the ones that necessarily are the ones to lead that change. And more younger people, if they're going to volunteer, they want to be flexible. They want to be volunteer and use the skills that they want to use. And maybe the volunteerism is going to be more computer work, social media, et cetera, like that. But I think that if we're going to involve the 16-year-olds, we can use them to crowdsource the solutions. I think that they might be able to, in their civics classes, be able to use this as a project. How do we get each other involved? How do we get your parent involved if you're from Ethiopia? How do you get your parent involved if you're from El Salvador, or Russia, or whatever the country? They will then use their own critical thinking skills to tell us what to do. And then we can support them. Regarding, I think the most valuable lesson I learned in this whole process, and if I don't win, I don't win. But the most valuable lesson I had was I had to face my own fears. I was afraid of our police department. It was a great police department maybe 15, 20 years ago, but in some very benign situations, I got really scared. And I just want to say that in order to face my fears, I went on a ride along. And I just want to say it was probably one of the best things I could ever do. So what we all have to do, and that's why I was talking about facing our fears, that's what we have to do. Get over those things and get out of our comfort zone and do the things that we just think we can put off. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so I have a question I'd like each of you to answer, and maybe keep this a little bit quick because we're going to try to go through as many questions as we can. And
We have a lot of
obviously,
questions here.
yeah, we have, limited time. What is the biggest issue facing Ward 1? And why don't we start with you, Ms. Wallace?
Biggest issue facing Ward 1?
Or what is your biggest issue? What do you see?
Biggest issue. I think it's police response, actually. I've talked to other neighbors who have had problems. I mean, if you can find your iPad in Southeast Washington, but the police say they can't, I don't get it. So I would really like more proactive policing.
Okay, and Mr. Tironi?
Yeah, I'm not sure that anyone stands out. I mean, I think the development that Peter was mentioning is certainly an important one.
Okay, Mr. Kovar?
I would say a few different developments. So in the case of the metro station, that's one where we have to work more with the District of Columbia. In the case of Montgomery College, which affects North Tacoma, that's one where I met recently with the provost of Montgomery College, but that's one where the county is obviously involved. In the case of the Tacoma kitchen on Tulip, which has been a source of some controversy, that's one where it's just the county, not the college system. And I think in all of those, what I noticed when I was going door to door, everybody mentioned parking, but each street and each neighborhood had a slightly different parking problem. And so I think taken together, that overwhelming set of issues around development, I think we need to have a comprehensive parking and traffic study to begin to move in the right direction on that.
Great.
Well, we have a couple of questions here from the audience about taxes, so I'll combine these two. Do you have any specific plans to lower taxes? I understand that Rockville taxes are approximately a third of Tacoma taxes. And also, this is the year that Takoma Park property is reassessed. Would you limit the percentage increase in the total dollars of Takoma Park property taxes? Mr. Kovar.
Yeah, I think what the impact will be on when the assessments go up, I think we still have to see. I think there are a few important points here. One, I think we've got to work with the county on this tax duplication issue, which I think, as people here know, we take on a lot of responsibilities ourselves, including police and recreation waste pickup, which the county could do, and we don't get a fair payment back from them. We have to address that. The city also has substantial reserves, and I'd like to review and understand what is the appropriate level of reserves and whether we could reduce that number. So I think starting with those two things, I think is crucial. At this point, I can't say what the specific tax rate should be, but I agree that in order to keep the area affordable, it's really important that we do everything possible to not let, when the new assessments come in, not let taxes go a lot higher, and certainly that would be something that would be focused on.
Yeah, taxes is one of the strategic things budget decisions that any level of government has to make. And, one way to approach it would be that if you're talking about like an ambitious budget or cutting back, these are questions that actually could be put on the ballot as advisory questions next time. And that could, would give people a reason to turn out and vote. And if it was well prepared and the citizens were informed, like, what are we going to do if we propose to spend this much money, we raise taxes by this much, what would that involve? Or on the other hand, we could cut these things and lower taxes. Do you really want to do that? That might be a nice thing to do and to get input from citizens.
Well, I echo the solutions that the other gentlemen have mentioned regarding continuing to fight for our right to have the tax, regarding the tax duplication. But I think it's really important to make sure that you really have a good streamlined budget so that you're not providing services that we could get, if we don't get those taxes back, so we're not providing services that we could get from Montgomery County. So budget is really important to look at. That's about it. I mean, I guess I really want to learn really from the city staff as well as the former city councilmen what it was that they were talking about these 20-something years about getting our money back and tax duplication. Why has it taken this long and it's still this like vague thing that we're still reaching for? So I have a lot to learn about what didn't work in the past. We got to figure out another perspective. Thank you.
Another question from the audience is about the speed at which things get done in the city. This person brings up the dog park as an example of something that doesn't seem to be moving very quickly. What is it that you would bring to the council that would help speed up the proposals for improvements in the city? And I guess we'll start with you, Ms. Wallace.
A timer, no. No, I myself have experienced frustration in the city, and sometimes something that I think should take a few days has taken 4 months. I'm just even waiting for an email response. I ran a company that we had to do things by the minute, so this is longer than a visa for some countries. What I would do to speed up is I would suggest training programs like peer-to-peer counseling, customer service, et cetera, so that the city government employees understand that really we are their customers and that they have accountability, and that they can, if they're going to do some work, that we have good paperwork that we can have a copy of when we submit the request and monitor it through a website and or personal conversations. It's about tracking the process of any request in the city government.
Thank you. Mr. Tironi?
Yeah, actually, to some extent, some things may have to be slowed down. If you want to get more citizen input and involvement on decisions, that might slow some decisions down. So it's really a question of why are things being slowed down or not. I'm not sure what the reason is on the dog park. There, I think the council decision was made pretty fast, and I don't think it was a big controversial thing.
Mr. Kovar?
Yeah, as I understand it, in the case of the dog park, because there's access through school property, which is the county, that ends up complicating that. And this gets back to what I was talking about earlier about the need to engage in a more focused way than maybe we have at times with these other jurisdictions that encircle us or that we're part of. But I think also part of it is I try to be diplomatic, but I think sometimes maybe you have to be willing to disappoint some people too. And I think I look at the Takoma Junction development as an example. There's a lot of different things that could happen there. Parking, expansion of the co-op, retail, housing, open space. And as admittedly not someone who is in every meeting on that, it looks as if instead of picking 2 or 3 of those that could fit at that site, we're still going ahead without ever having kind of fully prioritized what it should be. And all 5 of those things probably can't happen there. So I think at some point we just have to be willing to say, we're going to set the priorities, and it's going to be this. We'll do it through an open process, hearing from as many people as possible, and then try to move on, because I think that tends to slow things down if we're not willing at a certain point to say, okay, we're going to cut back and go with what we can fit on that site, as an example.
All right, we've only got a couple of minutes left. This is a short answer. Senator Mikulski's retirement has led to political churn. Do you pledge that you will not run for public office in 2016? Let's start with Ms. Wallace.
I absolutely promise, cross my heart, hope to die. I will not run.
Okay, we'll hold you to that. Mr. Tironi.
In 2016?
Yeah, well, that would be, for statewide
I'm
office.
not going to run for statewide office, no.
Okay. Or federal.
I'm not running for anything else.
Oh, okay, all right.
I
Okay.
have several relatives here who might do something if I did so.
All right, thank you. Do you have any others?
I actually want to ask, go back to Ms. Wallace's comments about crime. I think that's worth spending just one more minute with. It seems like Ward 1 is one of the locations where burglaries, have been on the rise in the last few years. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on the effect, I know that you, Ms. Wallace, have some thoughts on the effectiveness of the police department, but, what your thoughts are on things that the city maybe can do or approaches that you might take to, reduce that, the crime rate. Mr. Kovar?
Sure. I would say, first of all, I think the city is generally a safe place, but we're near a big urban center, and so that presents challenges. Where I live and where I am, and my wife takes the subway more than I do, what often happens is it's kind of a seasonal thing. So when the clocks change, which is coming up, I think, in a couple of weeks on November 1st, from that point until the end of the year, around the Christmas holidays, it's suddenly darker when everybody's coming back from the metro. And that's when some of the street crime, which is maybe separate from the break-ins that you were talking about, can occur. And I know that the police know that. What I'd like to see is the police force more proactively reaching out, maybe convening a meeting instead of us asking for one, and they would say, hey, folks in that neighborhood, and I realize the particular challenges may be different in other neighborhoods, but in that neighborhood, this is the time of year when this happens. Here's what we think you should do. Here's where to call if you have a problem. I don't think they should tell us specifically how they're changing their patrolling, but putting out the word that the patrolling is changing and getting beefed up. And then I've also heard that there's a need to get some better cooperation and maybe even a memorandum of understanding between our police and the DC police for these questions of hot pursuit when they run over across the border to catch somebody. So I think both cooperation with the district, and it would apply elsewhere, cooperation with Prince George's, and having the police force reach out in a more proactive way to get ahead of trends or flare-ups of particular types of crime trends that seem to be occurring.
Okay. We need to move along quickly, so if you could be brief with your responses.
So it's a complex question, but I want to focus on one element of it, which is the communications element. And that is that I think that if we adopt this kind of comprehensive communications strategy with citizens, the communication to and from police and citizens could be improved as part of that. But right now, it's very complicated to sign up for alerts from the police and other alerts from the city. So I would like to think about a more comprehensive system, and then there could be like selective communications from the police when there are particular things that people need to look out for.
Okay. Thank you.
I think it's pretty simple. I'm very glad that I got to know the officer that took me on my ride along. And I think it's pretty simple. It's get to know them personally. You can call it have a cup of coffee with a cop, okay? I'm not joking. It's really about getting to know them, because before I'd be afraid to call them. And if you take I have a suggestion in my flyer about something called the Human Library. You take off the body armor, sit with them, and have a nice conversation. Put some more on segues and make the uniform a little less dark. A lighter top and a lighter car. That sends a whole different message. The message that you get from the police in DC, a white car and a light blue top, there's less aggression toward police officers in other parts of the United States when they don't look so militarized. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm afraid we have to wrap up this segment here, but thank all of you for coming in and appearing here and for running.
Thank you.
Yes. And we're going to do another magical switch of name tags. And we will have the mayoral candidates come up. All right, we have two candidates for mayor. Thank you for waiting this long. I'm sorry we're running a little late. We'll have introductory statements and follow-ups and questions. And we have Councilmember Kate Stewart on the far side. and she is running for mayor and giving up her seat. And we have resident Warren Holmes, who is also running for mayor. And, oh, are the dice there? Okay, roll them. Okay.
So who goes first?
Highest number, I would imagine. Okay, yeah.
That's me.
Yeah,
Okay.
all right.
Thank you all
Yeah.
for coming out. Oh, should we
Three,
start?
3 minutes, and I'll give you a
Okay, tell me
30-second warning. Start now.
Okay. Thank you, Bill and Eric, for having us tonight. Thank you all for coming out and spending your evening with us this evening. So I am a lifelong resident of Takoma Park. I grew up just down Westmoreland in the PG section, and we were annexed into the city. As they were talking about unification earlier, it was a contentious subject in my family because our taxes pretty much doubled overnight. And some of you who have lived here for a long time may remember that my father actually contested the annexation because of the double taxation issue. Because essentially, if you lived in PG County prior to the unification, you were issued a double tax bill for the entire amount for that year. And so while you paid your $3,000 bill to PG County, the city then issued you another $4,000 bill, and you were then stuck with no recourse. So my father actually took the city to court and successfully sued the city and won, and they actually had to send checks out to everyone. So my history here goes back a long time. I was taught as an infant that if you don't like what you see in Takoma Park, you stand up for it. My wife actually ran for city council here 8 years ago because we were so frustrated. Then we went on to have babies and raise a family, and now we finally have just enough time to get back involved. I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old, and any of you that have children, you will know that there's a certain point where you just get a moment to be able to get back involved in things. And so I was absent for a little bit, but I wasn't not paying attention, and I was honestly quite disappointed with the progress that had happened in Takoma Park. And so I'm at a precipice now. So I am also a landlord in Takoma Park, and the policies of rent control that were enacted in 2005 have stifled the housing market in our city to the point where there's not much left, guys. You really need to take a look around and really be objective about it. Don't look at it from just price. Look at the housing stock and look at what we're talking about and what that means for our community. It's just one of my issues. I have an entire platform by the door. I would love for you to all take one on your way out and read it. It'll probably take you 15 minutes. I put a lot of thought into it, and there's a lot of different issues. But that's just one that I think gets to the heart of the issue that we need change here. And if that change requires me to come out and speak up for it, I will. Because they talk about engagement. But to be honest with you, had I not stood up a few weeks ago, there would not be much engagement. It's all just talk. They actually couldn't get 2 bodies to actually run for mayor. It takes an issue, is what it takes. They talk about engagement. It takes an issue. It doesn't take personalities. And that's been my experience over the past 39 years.
Time's up.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Councilmember Stewart, I'll give you the 30-second warning and start now.
Great. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Eric, for doing this evening. And thank you for all of you coming out today. Takoma Park is a wonderful community. And the reason we're such a wonderful community and city is because of all of you. It's the people who live here that make us a special place. And as we start this new chapter in our city's history, we can make it an even better place. We can make this city even better for all residents. I've been honored to be the city councilwoman for Ward 3. And with your support, I would very much like the opportunity to be the next mayor of Takoma Park. If I am the next mayor, I have 3 main priorities. The first is redefining community engagement. We've talked about community engagement tonight, but what we really need to do is redefine it. We need to get out, as members of earlier said in this forum, we need to get out in the community more. And I'd like to say that many of us are doing things that's not just talk. It's going to Blair High School and talking to the high school students. It's engaging young people who meet in our community center every week. And we need to do more of that. We need to get out in the community. We need to stop expecting people to come to us, and we need to get out more. The second priority goes to the theme of the earlier panel about unification. And it really is making sure that we're an inclusive city. And our goal at the end of the day should be that people don't just live in our city, but feel part of our community. And that's going to take a great deal of work. It takes a great deal of work when we think about our police policies and all the way to the redevelopment at Takoma Junction to make sure that all members of our community are involved in those decisions. And then finally, my third priority is sustainable development. There's a great deal of development that's going to happen around us, around the city, as we heard in PG County, other places in Montgomery County, and in the district. And we need solid relationships in the district, at the county and state level, to make sure development just doesn't happen to us. We need to make sure that we continue to push on environmental issues, as well as make sure that we have affordable housing in the city. I believe in our rent stabilization policy. Do I think we need to make changes? Absolutely. We need better affordable housing and more of it in our city. And we also need to make sure that businesses can stay in our city as the Purple Line gets developed. I lived in Takoma Park with my family for over 20 years. I first came here as a renter on Philadelphia Avenue. And then with my husband, we were lucky enough to purchase a home on Elm and Sycamore. And I've raised my two daughters, one who's a sophomore at Blair and the other who is in middle school at Takoma Middle School. Thank you.
Wow, 7 seconds to spare. All right, and 2-minute follow-ups. Starting now, I'll give you a 30-second warning. Okay, so starting now.
Okay, so I'm just gonna, she mentioned development, and I actually think this is a crucial topic for us to talk about here. We've been stuck in a bit of a rut as a community. We've had a very different culture in the past than we do now, okay? I've seen it. I grew up here, guys. I've seen the changes. Most of the hippies I used to know are dead now. I'm gonna be honest with you, okay? They're gone. They're either moved away or they're dead. But it's the truth. And so we have a new community here. And we need to grow as a community. Now, why do we have to grow? Because we have to increase our tax base so that we can make our community more affordable for everyone. How do we do that? We ease rent control, perhaps, just in some instances, perhaps. I think that that's a discussion as a community that we need to have that looks at the totality of the effects and weighs it. And perhaps we put it on the ballot. I'm not sure how we handle that exactly, but I think it's a community decision and not just 6 people. And so I think that actually, Mark Elrich started this 30 years ago, and I think this hasn't really been examined properly in at least 10 years, even though the city charter demands a closer examination than that. They pay no attention to things like that. They don't. That's very typical here. But if we can expand development in a way that we can
30 seconds.
all agree upon, we can increase the tax base and lower the tax burden on everyone and make the entire community more affordable.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Just staying on the theme of affordable housing, I think one of the things that we first need to do is really define what we mean by affordable housing. We've talked about affordable housing tonight, but I don't think we know what we mean when we say that. And I think it's an issue that people are grappling with in the entire region. People are grappling with it in the district. They're grappling with it in Virginia. We're doing it here in Takoma Park, and the county is doing it, and the state is doing it. What I would recommend first is that we sit down and we figure out what does it mean to have affordable housing in Takoma Park. I've had conversations with Casa de Maryland and people from the Renters Alliance to really start thinking about how do we increase our stock of affordable housing. As I said before, I favor our rent stabilization laws, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. We need to make sure that we have stable, predictable rents for people in our community so that they can build their homes and their families. And that's what I think we need to work on as we move forward.
Whole minute extra. All right, so now we will have some just questions from audience members and from us. And I guess really we should ask about what you think the top issues in the city are right now. And I'll give you a 2-minute response for that. And let's start with Warren.
Sure. Okay, so let's say there's 5 top issues. I'll just be real quick. We need to encourage development, ensure safety, change policy. We have to decrease our budget. Our overhead is extremely high here. I know everybody wants to increase services, but we have to be more creative with our spending. You do it in your own personal finances. We have to find ways as a city to be more creative. Also, we need to mitigate the impact of all this development. We have a lot of development in our neighborhoods. In my own neighborhood, I've had 11 houses built in the past 3 years, tear downs and rebuilt. And it not only changes the dynamic of the neighborhood, to be honest with you, sometimes for the positive, but it changes the pricing, the tax structure. It changes the accessibility of the neighborhood. When a developer comes in and buys a house for $200,000 or $250,000 and then puts a $750,000 house in place, the people that can afford to access that home dramatically changes. And I think as a society, we need to recognize the effects of that, and we need to mitigate those effects. Also, we have to work together. We are an extremely creative community. I mean, probably the most creative community in all of Washington. We have to work more than just putting a sun on the side of a wall, which my son loves, but we have to do more than just that, to engage people, to spread their arts, to give their arts to others. We used to have it a little bit more than we do now, but we need to actually bring that out. And then also, I believe that the last point is that we have to work as a community on rent stabilization, because we're looking at it from one perspective and not from both sides of the perspective.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Great, thank you. Well, in addition to the 3 issues I already talked about, redefining engagement, making sure we're an inclusive community, and sustainable development, I'd like to speak for a moment about policing issues. It's something that I've talked about while on the City Council. I think my colleagues on the City Council are probably tired of me handing out the President's 21st Century Task Force report on community policing, because I think we need to get back to community policing in our city. Right now, there's not great, and that's an understatement, not great relationships between members of our police department and particularly young people who live in our city. I had the opportunity to speak with Man Up, which is an organization that meets here in our community center. And I was surprised and shocked, quite frankly, to hear what those young people had to say to me about their interactions with our police department. And as we heard tonight, it's not just young people, but other members of our community feel like there's a great disconnect and not enough trust with our police department. One of the things that I'm most proud of since I've been on the City Council is that, along with my colleagues, we were able to put in money in the city budget this year to bring in an outside consultant to look at what we need to do in this city to improve police-community relations. Last week, with Councilmember Smith, I was able to meet with a member of the Prince George's County Council, and we talked about, if I am a mayor in the future, meeting quarterly, PG County, the district, and Takoma Park with residents, with our police chiefs, to talk about safety issues in the 3 jurisdictions to better coordinate our efforts. We need coordination, we need communication, and we need to build trust between our community and our police department.
Okay, thank you. We have a lot of questions from the audience. We'll try this one, although it's not quite worded as a question. Last Wednesday, this person drove, after talking to the sustainability person at Public Works, drove his car through Public Works from Oswego to Ritchie. A large pothole in the lot broke my oil pan, killing my 17-and-a-half-year-old car. So much for sustainability. So, how do you respond to that? I'll give you 30 seconds each.
Okay. Well, first, yikes, and sorry about that. I think one of the things that I'll address, this was a question that came up earlier about customer service. That is very important in the city. And I don't think we've been doing as well as we could. And some people may know that our city manager just became officially our city manager in April. She had been the deputy city manager. And one of the things the council has been talking about with her is improving customer service. Soon, the city will be unveiling a new website. And one of the things it will do is, instead of feeling like your complaints or your questions go into a black hole, you'll be able to track your questions, your complaints, your requests on the city website. And I think this will go a long way to increasing community service. It's not the end. We need to continue with this, but customer service is definitely a priority.
Okay.
So just, it's ironic, but I actually, so I just had, my entire neighborhood was just repaved, as Rizzy will contest to, and so I actually had on Rizzy's street, I was driving down his street one day just to see the progress, and I actually had my own vehicle damaged during all of this progress, and I called Daryl, and she says, oh, well, you have to call the paving company, you have to call WSSC, so I actually went through the claims process and was just denied just yesterday for damage to my vehicle. So I understand very well where this gentleman is coming from, and the bureaucracy he's up against. They're going to basically pass the buck from this person to the other, and someone will probably shrug it off in the end. But it does strike me very close to home.
Okay, that's,
Are we done?
yeah, for that one.
Okay.
All right, sorry. Yeah, I think we all feel for this guy.
Yeah.
So, you have one?
Well, I'll go to another question that brings up some of the issues that we've heard earlier today. Somebody asked about changes in Takoma Park, where we now see $500 baby carriages at the farmers market, objections to a medical marijuana store, objections to a Taco Bell serving low-income immigrants, crime and safety concerns trumping civil liberty concerns, cutting down trees to pave a paper city. And this person asks, are we becoming conservatives as a city?
Who goes first?
Are we becoming a more
Mr.
conservative
Holmes,
city?
You go.
I go first.
Give you a
Okay.
minute.
So nobody wants to hear the hard truth, but we may be, because our country is becoming a country of extremists. So how can you not come to the middle ground when what you see in the mainstream media is nothing but left and right stream extremists? That makes everyone a conservative if you look at it from that perspective. We all like to be moderates, and we all like to be intelligent people who can look at things from all perspectives. And so therefore, I hear this same sentiment from a lot of people in Takoma Park, where they hate the idea of being called a Republican, but their mores and their culture is becoming more and more conservative. And I think that just has to do with our national politics as a whole.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay, 1 minute.
Great. I do think our city is going through changes. A generational shift. I have a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old now, and I go to the farmer's market, and I'm like, oh my gosh, where are all these little kids coming from? But that's what we need to look at as we move forward as a city. It's a shift, but we need to bring people together. And the Takoma Junction debate last winter really showed that. There are people who fought so hard in our community to make sure we are a community and not a highway. And there are new people who've come into our community who are looking for potentially different things, different services. What we need are leaders who are going to bring people together to have the conversations we need. Because I said before, it's one thing to live in a city, it's another thing to be part of a community. And that's what our goal should be.
All right, thank you. I have one. This was submitted on the web. It's a combination of two questions. So on one side, Kate, you've served only 1.5 years on the council, and Howard, you have never served on the council. Warren, excuse me. How can you be an effective mayor of Takoma Park Council and city activities? So Warren first.
Sure. So, like I said, I grew up here. You may question, my qualifications, and to be honest with you, that comes from living here. I would say if I had just moved into the city a year ago, probably no, I wouldn't be qualified to be mayor. But if you lived here since the time you were born, the culture is just literally part of your bloodstream. And you can't help but know the ethos. Now, I understand completely, as Kate says, it has changed. I've watched it change house by house. But I think my qualifications go deeper than that. As Rizzy will tell you, who lives in my neighborhood,
15.
It goes back to, it starts in your neighborhood and it goes from there. And pretty much everyone in my neighborhood knows me. And I wish that everyone in town knew me. You can't effectualize that, but I hope to.
You guys are good at keeping to the...
We don't like that
I'm
noise.
impressed.
Trying to avoid it.
Okay. So, yes, Ms. Stewart.
Great. So first, I think, we have a council, 6 council members, a mayor, and diversity is good. And having different point of view, people who grew up here, lived here for a long time, people who just moved in, all adds to our conversation and the decisions we make. For me personally, I just say I've been a renter here, I've been a homeowner, I've lived here over 20 years. I'm a reproductive rights and civil rights activist. I've been an executive at a nonprofit, a small business owner, a soccer coach, and a community activist. And I love this city. I've worked very hard as the city councilwoman for Ward 3. And as I said, it would be an honor to be the next mayor of the Takoma Park.
Okay, thanks. We're getting close to the end. Let me ask that one short question. It was such a good one last time. Will you take the 2016 campaign pledge not to run in 2016 for another office? Ms. Stewart?
Yes, because I have a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old, and my number one priority is staying as close to home as possible.
Okay.
And
Senator Holmes?
I feel the same way. I have no political ambitions in this world. I actually just want to change my town. I feel like we've been stifled by idealism for a long time, and it's finally time for the truth to prevail. And I don't, if it took Bruce to retire, it took Bruce to retire. That's why nobody ever went up against him. But now we have this opportunity as a community to actually change. We have an opportunity to make a discussion before things were stifled. I'm impressed with this new council. Like I said, I had lost focus back when, oh God, people used to fall asleep at city council meetings, if you guys recall, back in the day. It did used to happen. There used to people literally fall asleep during meetings. So how could you not check out if the city council members are actually asleep at the meeting? And I think that goes to the whole populace. But we're at a time now where if we don't start to pay attention, guys, look at what's happened in D.C. Look at what's happened to D.C. just across the borders from us. But if you go all the way into D.C., and then you compare the change that's happened in Washington with the minuscule changes that have occurred here in Takoma, something has to change eventually, guys, or we're going to get left in the Stone Ages. And
Okay,
that's just...
we're moving beyond the scope of the question.
Sorry.
But I guess,
I like to ramble.
But I have a follow-up, actually, because I'd like some clarity on, specifically what ideals you feel are, we need to move beyond, and also what the consequences of those ideals could be. So a little bit more specific on
Which,
that. Well, you were just talking about how we're going to be left behind in the Stone Age.
Well, a lot of that,
and we need to kind of be
a lot
more
of that
real.
goes to our development and our tax base. So people always, and even I complain when I have to pay my property taxes. They're extremely high. My neighbor's tax bill is $11,000 a year. That's an enormous burden. It's a newer house. But I think that if we don't understand the full, people like to look at the trees and not the forest. If you don't understand the full spectrum of how we get our money to fund our budget, then you don't understand what we're funding. Property taxes are a big deal here because it goes to the affordability. And that's what I'm getting at is the development. We here in Takoma Park, we like things the exact way they are. We don't like change. We really don't. It's uncomfortable. We really want to stay a movie set out of time, right? We love that feel. Yeah. But we're at a place, Eric, where that if we don't find a way to grow, we may die.
Okay, and Ms. Stewart, wonder if you could respond to that in terms of, you know, maybe the challenges of tax rates or tax bills going up and,
Sure.
you
Well,
know.
I think one thing I would like to say is that I think we have grown. I think we have changed in the last few years. I think if you look at, you know, Old Town Tacoma, it's very different than it was just a few years ago. And as Mr. Kovar mentioned, we have challenges that come with that, parking and other issues. We moved forward with plans to redevelop the junction. There's been a great deal of change in our community. On the tax base, that each year the city council works on the budget. That's a difficult time because we are trying to balance the priorities, the needs, with keeping the taxes as low as possible. And, sorry, do I have, okay.
No, 15.
Okay. And as we talked about before, you know, again, tax duplication, more than happy to go into the history of that. But also looking at our reserves, something Councilmember Mail has been prompting us to do is another thing that we'll be taking up. But I think each year, we need to look at the budget we have and then also be projecting out. We haven't really done that as a city, which is look not just at this year, but projecting our budgets out. And that's one thing I'd like us to do more of.
Okay, and I actually just want to follow up because I find this really at the crux of a lot of, you know, issues with this election and with this period in Takoma Park's history. So, you know, what are the ideals, according to each of you, since we are using that term, that you feel should define our future, you know, as we go forward as a city? You know, what are the values that that we feel should define Takoma Park? And Mr. Holmes.
Well, like I was talking about earlier and how I've lived here and I've seen the transition, I think that our value system is actually probably in transition at the current moment because we as a city are in transition. We have, if you look around and just all the changes, we have just, our communities kind of change over very rapidly and we have an entire new population here. Our values, I think, they're meshed out by the city council by having people involved. Now, how you get people involved and how you include everyone is an entirely another discussion. But getting to the crux of our initiatives, it goes to our culture, and I really think that our culture speaks to the people. I think if you really want to see our culture, go to the farmers market, the one, not only the one in Old Town, but go to the one at the crossroads, and to see the people, and really, if you've lived here for more than 5 or 10 years, I think that you know the culture pretty well. It's just a matter of assimilating everyone. I just spoke to someone about this just the other day, a woman from Japan, and I was talking about the differences between Japanese culture and American culture. And I'll finish real quick. And in my travels in Japan, I found that the culture there was astonishingly homogenous. And we as a culture are extremely diverse. But being a diverse culture, we have to find common ground to produce this common culture. And that's where we're sort of in this limbo right now, I want to say, in that our American culture is completely undefined. And I think that's something as a society we have to determine because we're not a group of immigrant populations. We're actually one American population.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'll sum it up in 3 words. The ideals that I believe Takoma Park is about, and I hope we live up to, is inclusive, equitable, and innovative. We're striving to be inclusive with our diverse communities that live here, with the generational differences, all the things we've talked about tonight. Equitable, because sometimes some folks in our community need a little bit more. As we talked about before, there are people who are in our community who are not secure food-wise. There are other people, we need to do things like Lifelong Tacoma and Tacoma Village. Those are all things we need to make sure that people have the services they need. And finally, innovative, that goes for on the environment, looking at affordable housing. Takoma Park is the right size. We're 17,000 people. And we're not so small that the things we do won't matter, and we're just the right size to be able to actually do innovative programs. So it's inclusive, equitable, and innovative.
All
Thank
right.
you.
And I just want to note, addressing the changes we've seen in the last 2 years, I went back and looked at the forum for the last election 2 years ago, and the biggest laugh line was a question from the audience: when is Takoma Park going to have a nightlife? And now we have parking
And
and
ask the
and
people
noise
on
problems.
Westmoreland.
Yeah, right. So do we have, I think we're kind of out of time. I hate to do it, because there's so many more questions. It's really too bad. Yeah, okay, there is one really important one that it really has come up. We've briefly dealt with it. It's come up, and that is policing. And I know that a lot of people have talked about that, but we haven't talked too much about it tonight. Could you each address the issues that you see around policing? We'll make that the last serious round. Okay, Ms. Stewart?
Sure. This is an issue that I've raised on the City Council numerous times. As was brought up before, I think our police vehicles are too dark. Our police officers' uniforms are too dark. I believe we need to be following the President's 21st Century Task Force on community policing. We need to move from a warrior model of policing to one of a guardian model. Everyone in our community needs to feel that they can approach the police department, that they can trust the police department. The police department is for our safety, but also to guard our civil rights. And we need to move in that direction. And all the studies show that if we have good community policing, when our police are solving problems and implementing solutions with members of the community, we will prevent more crime and we will solve more crime.
Okay, so getting to the police issue, what I'd like to see from our police, to be honest with you, is more foot patrols. I always see them in cars driving by at 20 miles an hour, but I can't tell you the last time I've seen a police officer on foot just hanging out in Old Town or just walking around, especially around the metro. And to be honest with you, what I'd love to see, there are pedestrian corridors. People walk home from the metro in specific corridors, whether it be Eastern Avenue, whether it be Westmoreland, whether it be Carroll, whether it be Cedar, whether it be Maple. There are specific routes home from the metro. What I would like to see as a citizen is that I was walking down one of those routes, and out of nowhere, a cop just said, "Hey." I said, "Wow, I didn't even see you there." That's what I would like.
15.
I would like cops on the street, not in stakeout situations, but just in positions that you and I would be in. And I'll tell you what, if they were in that position, they would actually deter crime and actually probably catch people. Because when they drive by in a car, whoever this person is, this criminal is, they see the police drive by and they wait a few minutes and then they do whatever they're going to do, and the cop's already a mile down the road. I want to see cops on bikes again, which happened a long time ago. I don't know if the bikes all broke. I don't know what happened, but you haven't seen a cop on a bike in years.
Time.
I'd also love to see cops on Segways. I don't know how we pay for the Segways, but I'd love to see that. I know they do it in D.C. If we expanded the tax base, we may have the money for that.
Speaking of Segway, to wrap it up?
Yep.
Okay. All right. I think we've tortured these people long enough. And for those of you at home watching, you're officially a wonk for lasting this long. And I think I'd just like to say thank you to all the candidates, and good luck to all of you. These people, I do admire these people quite a bit, because they're making a big effort in their lives, taking a big chunk out of their lives to run for office and or to serve. So, yeah. And I'd like to also thank the city staff, City Clerk Jesse Carpenter, Video Production Manager Alvaro Calabia.
Okay, and I want to remind everybody that if you go to Takoma.com, we have a page set up where you can find links to all of the candidates, and you can learn more about their positions by following it to their websites. I know that a lot of people submitted questions. We tried to ask as many as we could, and obviously, time doesn't permit. for us to get to all of them. We will do our best to get these questions to candidates before the election and get them posted on our website so that if we did not get to your question tonight, in the next week or so, you'll be able to find it at Takoma.com.
All right, and thank you and good night. Whew.